My fiancé poisoned my dog since he grabbed more attention. When I found out, I pressed charges on the spot. I'm 30. I've always been a dog person, the kind who stops to pet every pup I meet on the street. Since I was a kid, I dreamed of having my own dog named Max. It wasn't just a childhood fantasy. It was something I carried with me into adulthood, waiting for the right moment when I could give a dog the life it deserved. That moment finally came when I landed a decent job and found a rental with a fenced yard. I remember the day I adopted him from the shelter. This energetic mixed breed with soulful eyes who couldn't stop wagging his tail. He became my shadow, my running partner, my road trip buddy. Every morning started with our jog around the neighborhood, and every evening ended with him curled up next to my feet while I watched TV. At the time, I'd been dating Sam for 2 years, and we were 6 months into our engagement. She seemed fine with Max at first, though looking back, there were signs I chose to ignore. She'd make these little comments, half joking, but with an edge to them. If the dog's that important, maybe we should include him in the wedding, she'd say, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Sam was always the type who needed to be the center of attention. At parties, at family gatherings, even just at home, she had to be the focal point. I didn't realize then how much it bothered her when people would coo over Max, or when I'd spend time playing with him instead of focusing on her. What I discovered later, through police investigation and piecing together security camera footage from our local pet store, was that Sam had been planning to harm Max for weeks. She'd been researching various substances, carefully documenting what might look like natural causes versus what might raise suspicions. She'd even joined online forums about pet behavior issues, probably trying to create a backstory in case anyone questioned Max's sudden illness. The night everything came to light started normally enough. I was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through my phone and half watching some Netflix show. Max was in his bed nearby. I remember thinking he seemed quieter than usual, but I figured he was just tired from our longer than normal morning run. Then I heard it, this awful retching sound. Max stood up, swaying like he was drunk. His eyes were unfocused, and he was panting in a way I'd never heard before. Sam was in the kitchen, and when I look back now, I remember how she barely reacted to Max's distress. She just kept wiping the counter, methodically, almost robotically. The drive to the emergency vet is still a blur in my memory. Sam insisted on staying home, claiming she didn't want to get in the way. Now I understand she probably needed that time to dispose of evidence. The vet later found traces of cleaning products in Max's system, but what they didn't know then was that in our kitchen trash, wrapped in layers of paper towels, was an empty bottle of carpet cleaner mixed with what we later discovered was rat poison. When I got home that night, around midnight, Sam's behavior sent chills down my spine. She was just sitting there, scrolling through wedding venues on her phone like nothing had happened. She asked about Max in this flat, disinterested tone, the same way you might ask about a stranger's cold. No real concern, no emotion. The next day, while picking up Max from the vet, something the technician said stuck with me. They mentioned Max's symptoms matched those of gradual poisoning, not just a one-time exposure. That's when the pieces started falling into place. All those times Sam had insisted on preparing Max's food when I worked late, her newfound interest in helping with his care. I set up my phone to record while I was supposedly out running errands. What I captured made my blood run cold. Sam methodically mixing something into Max's food, muttering to herself about how things would be better soon. When confronted, she tried to pass it off as a supplement, but her hands were shaking as she held the container. The police investigation revealed even more horrifying details. They found a notebook hidden in her craft supplies, filled with research on various poisons and their effects on dogs. There were timestamps, doses, even notes about Max's behavior changes. She'd been systematically poisoning him for weeks, carefully increasing the doses to make it look like a gradual illness. What broke me wasn't just the poisoning. It was the chilling level of calculation behind it. The police investigation revealed a pattern so methodical, it made my skin crawl. Security footage from local stores showed Sam buying different cleaning products over several weeks, always paying cash, always wearing nondescript clothing and often a hat or sunglasses. She'd spread her purchases across multiple stores in different neighborhoods, clearly trying to avoid raising suspicions. The digital evidence was even more disturbing. She created multiple fake email accounts to join various pet health forums and veterinary discussion groups. In these forums, she'd ask seemingly innocent questions about symptoms similar to poisoning, gathering information about what would look natural versus suspicious. She'd even started threads about grieving the loss of a pet, presumably studying the responses to make her eventual reaction to Max's death more convincing. The detective assigned to our case found a burner phone in her craft room, hidden inside a hollowed-out book. The phone contained dozens of screenshots of articles about pets dying from mysterious illnesses, along with notes about symptoms and progression timelines. She'd been methodically researching how to make Max's decline appear natural, right down to the expected timeline for organ failure. The confrontation in our kitchen that night still haunts me. When I demanded to know what she was putting in Max's food, her mask finally slipped. "He's always been in the way," she spat. "It's always Max this, Max that. What about me? When do I get to be the most important thing in your life?" The police took it all seriously, thank God. The evidence was overwhelming: the notebook, the store footage, the vet reports, and finally, the lab results from that powder I caught her using. It wasn't just some random cleaning product. It was a calculated mixture designed to cause organ failure over time. During the legal proceedings, more details emerged about her planning. She'd been collecting articles about dogs dying from mysterious illnesses, probably preparing her defense. She'd even started telling friends and family that Max had health issues, laying groundwork for what she hoped would look like a natural death. The aftermath was brutal but necessary. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, each hearing revealing new layers of Sam's calculated cruelty. Her lawyer tried to paint it as a mental health crisis, arguing that wedding stress and relationship anxiety had pushed her to make poor decisions. But the evidence told a different story. During discovery, prosecutors uncovered dozens of deleted searches on her laptop about untraceable poisons and how to make a dog's death look natural. They found receipts for various toxic substances, carefully purchased from different stores to avoid suspicion. She'd even joined multiple pet grief support groups online, presumably studying how other dogs had died to make Max's eventual death seem more believable. The court-appointed psychiatrist's evaluation was particularly damning. She displayed classic signs of narcissistic personality disorder, showing no genuine remorse for her actions. Instead, she was primarily concerned with how the case would affect her reputation and future relationships. When asked directly about Max's suffering, she redirected the conversation to how the dog had ruined her relationship with me. The turning point in the case came when one of Sam's friends came forward, who'd known Sam since college, revealed that Sam had confided in her about wanting to get rid of Max months before the poisoning began. She dismissed it as venting at the time, but after seeing the evidence, she couldn't stay silent. Her testimony proved that this wasn't a spontaneous act of jealousy. It was premeditated. Sam ultimately pleaded no contest, but the judge was far from lenient. During sentencing, he spoke at length about the special kind of cruelty involved in poisoning a defenseless animal over time. He noted that someone capable of watching an animal suffer day after day while pretending to care for it showed dangerous psychological patterns. The sentence included not just fines and community service, but mandatory psychological counseling. She was banned from owning or living with pets for life, and her name was added to an animal abuse registry that would alert shelters and breeders if she ever tried to adopt. The judge also granted me a permanent restraining order, ensuring she couldn't come near me or Max again. The fallout in our social circle was intense. Some mutual friends initially took her side, buying into her story about being a stressed-out bride who made one mistake. But as the evidence became public, the notebooks, the calculated purchases, the weeks of systematic poisoning, support for her crumbled. Even her own sister, who'd been her strongest defender, ultimately admitted that what Sam had done was monstrous. These days, Max and I are doing better, He's back to his energetic self, though it took months before he'd eat without me watching his bowl. I've moved to a new place, installed security cameras, and become almost obsessive about who handles his food. Some might say I'm paranoid, but after what we went through, I'd rather be safe than sorry. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I missed: her growing resentment, the way Max would cower around her, her insistence on preparing his food. But more than that, I learned something crucial. Someone who can systematically plan to harm a defenseless animal is capable of much worse. Over time, her annoyance grew more obvious. She'd snap at me whenever I focused on my dog, claiming I spoiled him more than I cared for her. I tried attributing it to wedding stress, hoping it would pass, but her irritation only intensified. Sometimes I'd come home to find her glaring at him as if he were an uninvited guest. I'm just grateful I discovered the truth before we got married, before she could do any permanent damage to Max. The experience changed me, but not all changes are bad. I'm more cautious now, more observant. And my bond with Max? Stronger than ever. Every morning when we go for our run, watching him bounce along without a care in the world, I'm reminded that sometimes the worst moments in life lead us to exactly where we need to be. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.